All right, so we're going back in time a bit today, back to the 80s and 90s.
Ah, yes, the 80s and 90s.
And, well, those decades were all about going big. And when it comes to big, no one really embodies that like Donald Trump.
He really does epitomize that era.
He went from, building in Queens to becoming like this American dream icon, only it was like the American dream, but, covered in gold.
I like that covered in gold. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and you've brought some amazing material for us to dig into today, and we're going to really unpack how the Trump brand, well, really took off during those years.
It's a fascinating period, to examine how Trump's vision, right, which was always about scale, how that moved from just ideas to like actual buildings and very deliberately, crafting his image.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at how this play out with some really iconic properties. We're talking Trump Tower, of course.
Yeah.
The Plaza Hotel, that massive Mar-a-Lago estate down in Palm Beach. His big push into the casino scene in Atlantic City.
It's a pretty impressive list.
Yeah. But it went way beyond buildings, too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Trump name started showing up on all sorts of products.
Oh, yeah, he was everywhere.
So our goal today is to really figure out how Trump went from being a successful businessman to like a full-blown cultural icon during those years.
And I think it's important to keep in mind, the bigger picture here. This wasn't just a personal success story. It really reflects a key moment in American culture, a time of, big economic growth, a real fascination with wealth, with status.
Right. And Trump both reflected that.
Yeah,
And I think really helps shape it in the public eye.
definitely.
So let's start with where things visually at least got really spectacular. Trump Tower opened in '83.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just another skyscraper going up in Manhattan, right?
No, it was not.
It was a statement.
It was a statement. And, Trump was very clear with his architects. He didn't just want a building. He wanted, quote, the most spectacular building New York has ever seen.
Wow.
And in many ways, he achieved that, right? This 58-story glass tower right in the heart of Manhattan's best shopping district.
Prime real estate.
The thing is, Trump understood early on that luxury real estate wasn't just about providing a place to live. It was about creating an aspirational lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
And he used architectural spectacle celebrity to really market that vision. And that became like his blueprint going forward.
It wasn't just the height or the location either. It was the opulence of it all. I mean, that 6-story atrium with waterfalls over Italian, pink marble, high-end boutiques. It was an experience.
It was designed to be an experience. That atrium wasn't just a place to walk through. You're supposed
Yeah.
to stop and experience it. The materials, the pink marble, it all signaled a level of luxury that was so different from the, minimalist designs that were popular at the time.
It was a statement.
Exactly like the architecture critic Paul Goldberger called it, a glitzy pleasure dome.
Perfect.
Yeah, pretty much sums it up.
And then you had all those celebrity residents, Michael Jackson, Steven Spielberg, Johnny Carson living there. I mean, that must have made it even more desirable. It's not just a luxury building. It's where the stars live.
Exactly. It created this aspirational pull. Living in Trump Tower wasn't just about having a nice apartment. It was about associating yourself with success, achievement. It reinforced the image Trump was building.
And speaking of luxury, the source material really goes into detail about Trump's own penthouse gold leaf accents, those huge Central Park views, even Renaissance-inspired frescoes.
Yeah.
It sounds almost theatrical. I mean, was all this extravagance admired, or did some people find it a bit much?
That's an interesting question, because that kind of, overt display of wealth became a trademark of the Trump brand. It wasn't about being subtle. It was about being seen. And the public reaction. I mean, you had thousands of people lining Fifth Avenue for the opening. The New York Times called it the ultimate monument to conspicuous consumption.
Wow.
So I think it's safe to say it captured the public imagination. It aligned perfectly with the, 80s obsession with wealth. It really tapped into the zeitgeist.
So Trump Tower, it wasn't just a real estate success. It was a cultural moment.
It was more than just a building. It was a phenomenon.
Okay, so let's jump ahead a few years to 1988, and Trump makes another big move. He buys this. The Plaza Hotel. And the price tag alone was massive. $407 million, almost $500,000 per room.
And what's striking here is how Trump talked about the purchase. He didn't just say he bought a building. He said he bought a masterpiece. He compared it to the Mona Lisa.
Wow.
So he immediately elevated it beyond just a business deal and framed it as something, artistic, culturally significant.
And the Plaza already had this incredible history, right? I mean, The
Yeah.
Great Gatsby, the Beatles stayed there, Hitchcock filmed North by Northwest there. It's an icon.
Exactly. So by buying the Plaza, Trump wasn't just buying another property, he was associating himself with this legacy, claiming a piece of American cultural history.
Right.
He was presenting himself as the new custodian of this landmark.
And then the renovation was a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Trump and Ivana led the charge, and it cost something like $50 million to restore everything.
Yeah.
Refurbishing those crystal chandeliers, custom French fabrics, bringing the Palm Court back to its original glory.
And it was all very deliberate, this renovation. It
Right.
wasn't just about modernizing the Plaza. It was about restoring it to a bygone era, further reinforcing this sense of timeless glamour and Ivana's prominent role, that famous quote about her getting $1 and all the dresses she can buy.
Yeah.
It all added to the storybook quality of the whole thing.
And the parties, I mean, Adnan Khashoggi's birthday party with 600 guests, you really get this picture of wealth, celebrity, and power all coming together in one place, and Trump right there in the middle of it.
Exactly. Under Trump, the Plaza became a stage for this intersection of, high society and celebrity culture, and it further solidified his image as someone who not only had money, but could command the attention of the elite.
So with the Plaza, it wasn't just about building something new. It was about acquiring and, I guess you could say, taking ownership of this existing piece of American glamour and history.
Exactly. He leveraged the Plaza's existing prestige to boost his own brand and image.
Okay, so in 1985, we see Trump making a move that maybe wasn't expected. He goes to Palm Beach and buys Mar-a-Lago, this unbelievable 1920s Hispano-Moorish palace.
Yeah, it was an incredible estate, originally built by Marjorie Merriweather Post with 58 bedrooms, that 75-foot tower. It represented a kind of old world opulence that was very different from the sleek modernity of Trump Tower.
And it had fallen into disrepair, right?
Mm.
The city of Palm Beach, I guess, thought it was too expensive to maintain as a museum, and that's when Trump swoops in and gets it for a steal only $8 million.
That was a very smart move. He got this historically and architecturally significant property for what seems like a tiny fraction of its value, and that quote, "The day I bought Mar-a-Lago was one of the great days of my life," really shows how personally attached he was to it.
Yeah, and the renovation that followed was just as ambitious as the Plaza, restoring those gold leaf details. Venetian tiles, a $7 million gold leaf ballroom, an elaborate Italian mosaic pool. It seems like he spared no expense in bringing it back to its former glory and maybe even exceeding it.
Absolutely. The scale of the renovation shows just how committed Trump was to creating these palatial environments. It wasn't just about restoring, it was about amplifying the grandeur, the luxury.
But the real turning point with Mar-a-Lago came in '95 when he turned it into a private club. With membership fees starting at $50,000 and eventually going up to $200,000, it became this ultra-exclusive social hub.
It was a brilliant move. By making it a private club, he not only dealt with the huge upkeep costs of such a massive estate, he also put himself right at the center of Palm Beach society, and the fact that the established elite, the old money crowd, who may have seen him as an outsider, the fact that they were eager to join really shows how socially successful he was.
So Mar-a-Lago wasn't just a personal prize. It became this social space where Trump, the relative newcomer, actually managed to integrate himself into the old money establishment.
Exactly. He reimagined this historic estate as a stage for a new kind of social power dynamic, and he was at the center of it.
Okay, so let's switch gears and head up to the East Coast gambling mecca, Atlantic City. From the mid-'80s through the '90s, you had this rapid series of Trump developments: Trump Plaza, Trump's Castle, and of course the very highly publicized Trump Taj Mahal.
Yeah, Atlantic City was a different side of Trump's ambition. He was moving into the world of large-scale entertainment and gaming. He wasn't just building hotels or apartments. He was creating destinations for leisure and high-stakes gambling.
And the financing involved in casinos and the competition there made it very risky.
Oh, for sure. Very risky.
And the Taj Mahal was often called the eighth wonder of the world. The sheer scale of the project is mind-blowing. A $1.2 billion investment, thousands of workers, huge amounts of concrete, all those chandeliers.
It was the ultimate expression of Trump's desire to build something truly monumental, and that grand opening gala with Michael Jackson performing, it really reinforced that image of Trump as not just a businessman, but this entertainment mogul.
Yeah, and his quote about the Taj attracting the highest rollers, the biggest names, the most beautiful women, it's classic Trump, right? That over-the-top style.
Yeah.
But it definitely contributed to the image he wanted to project.
Oh, absolutely. It created buzz. It reinforced this image of high-stakes glamour. Now, of course, some people were skeptical about how much of it was true,
Yeah.
whether the reality lived up to the hype.
Yeah.
But it was all part of the marketing strategy, selling this aspirational experience of success and excitement, the features of the casinos, all those slot machines, the luxury suites with butlers, the famous chefs. It all contributed to this very carefully crafted image.
But the source material also mentions those financial struggles, right? I mean,
Yeah.
huge debt, massive operating costs, and eventually some of these ventures became unstable.
Yeah, the sheer scale of these projects came with significant financial risks. But even the bankruptcies became part of the Trump story, right?
Right.
His spin on it was that it was all strategic, managing debt effectively. And he emphasized that the Trump name still had value.
So even when things weren't going well, it was spun into a positive, further reinforcing the idea that the Trump brand was resilient.
Exactly. It showed his ability to control the narrative even when facing financial challenges.
So Atlantic City was this grand experiment in branding and entertainment on a huge scale. It showed both the ambition and the risks that came with operating at that level.
It was a testing ground for the power of the Trump name.
Yeah.
Its ability to attract attention, create excitement in a really competitive industry.
And all these high-profile ventures, these properties that everyone was talking about, they all built up to something much bigger, the rise of the Trump brand itself. By the 90s, it wasn't just a family name anymore. It was a symbol.
Right. That's when the real transformation happened. Trump went from being a name to a representation of success, luxury, and a certain kind of American ambition. It became this intangible asset, valuable beyond just real estate.
And then you have all those brand extensions, Trump Ice, Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump Magazine, even Trump University. It felt like anything could have the Trump name on it.
It showed the power of the name, its appeal in the market. And then licensing the name to buildings and developments all over the world that expanded its reach even further. And that consistent marketing, always the best, the greatest, the most luxurious, that was key to establishing the brand identity.
And then in 2004, you have The Apprentice.
Yeah.
And that felt like it launched the Trump brand into a whole new level.
Yeah.
He was in millions of living rooms every week.
The Apprentice was definitely a game changer. It took him from successful businessman to a household name. The viewership was huge, over 20 million people watching every week. That's incredible exposure for the brand.
And the visuals of the show, the helicopter shots, the limousines, those marble lobbies, it all reinforced that image of wealth, power, success.
Yeah.
The image he'd been building for decades through his real estate.
The Apprentice was the visual embodiment of the Trump brand. Authority, wealth, decisive leadership, and that catchphrase, "You're fired." It became instantly recognizable.
It's funny, though, because the source material talks about this kind of paradox. In the messaging, he was presented as this billionaire, but also somehow relatable. He liked McDonald's, he used simple language.
That duality was probably a big reason for the brand's success. It let people connect with him in different ways. Some admired his success, while others maybe felt like they shared some of his values.
So the Trump brand became this incredibly valuable thing, maybe even more valuable than the properties themselves.
The name took on a cultural meaning and value that went way beyond real estate.
And looking back at this whole period, this Trump paradigm, as the source material calls it, it's clear he did something really remarkable. He went from businessman to this huge cultural figure.
His influence on how we view wealth, success, status, it's undeniable. He shaped American culture, and even though his style definitely had its critics, he really understood the media and the power of perception.
And his buildings, they weren't just places to live or work, they were stages for him. And his whole business strategy seemed to be about getting and keeping the public's attention.
Attention was currency, and he was a master at generating it and using it to his advantage.
He even had a term for it, truthful hyperbole, basically exaggerating to make people believe. Because, as he said, people want to believe that something is the biggest and the greatest and the most spectacular.
That really sums up his approach to branding and communication. It wasn't about being literally accurate. It was about creating a compelling story, something people wanted to believe.
And in the end, it seems like Trump didn't just ride the wave of the 80s and 90s. He really helped define them.
His approach to business, to branding, to self-promotion, it became a characteristic of that era, and it really foreshadowed so many of the trends we see today. Personal branding, reality TV, the blurring of business and entertainment.
It was like mastering the American imagination was the key to his success, maybe even more important than the real estate itself. And it definitely paved the way for his move into politics.
Absolutely. The power of his brand, his connection with a big part of the American public, it became a force to be reckoned with.
So to wrap it up, this deep dive into the 80s and 90s shows us how Donald Trump through these ambitious real estate projects. His branding strategy and his understanding of the media really captured the American imagination during a time of big change.
And it's worth thinking about how the things we've talked about today, the power of branding, the spectacle of wealth, the blurring of reality and perception, how those things are still influencing our world today, not just in business, but in all aspects of our culture.
It makes you wonder what parts of this Trump paradigm are still playing out today and what that means for us all.
It's a question worth pondering.